This is Graydon Miller reading the story Ulises from the upcoming story collection Watsonville Stories from 80 Miles Per Hour Productions next spring. Ulises. Norby had put off coming back to Watsonville long as he could and arranged for extra days in the dorm as the Yuletide exodus rendered the campus silent and frozen, leaving him alone with the freezing rats as the students massed back home for the holidays. Norby was in no hurry to go back to that shithole, Watsonville. Once he got there, he'd go to his mom's apartment in San Francisco. Baron Norbert Randolph Stade IV would find things to do in the city before making a perfunctory appearance at the night of opening presents after the 6 p.m. service at the Presbyterian Church. Norby and Laura took advantage of the dormitory's isolation, while the snowflakes danced outside the dormer window and frosted the denuded elm branches in the empty quad and made the ground acutely white as not a soul trudged down in it to reveal the black macadam underneath. Norby and Laura did it in the kitchen. They did it in the steamy shower. They did it on the landing, where they were interrupted by shrewd rats seeking refuge in the only quarters still heated in the dorm. And Hinton, the swarthy old super with the unintelligible Vermont accent whose cheeks flamed, retreated down the stairwell. Laura was nice to touch. Her wiry Afro-Jewish hair cut close to the perfect skull thrilled his fingertips and passed to the cable knit sweater that came off with ease and the shrill purple musk that rose from underneath her panties, and the corrugated scent of sandalwood perfume stayed with Norby even when a couple thousand miles separated him from Newark, where Laura was from, and he could conjure her slim midriff and dark flashing eyes when he was lonely. Stately plump Buck Mulligan came. Norby returned now to his reading so he'd have something to converse about with Laura when he got back east. Again, he took up the intimidatingly thick novel, copy number 7 from the stacks of Sterling Memorial Library. Norby snorted a chuckle. Good grief, he read Buck as fuck. It meant he was getting horn dog. It happened every 5 minutes or so, like when he'd look at the braided doormat at Grandma Chloe's old Victorian at Heartbreak Ranch as he wiped his soles on it, and it would conjure women's bodies and star-nippled breasts entwined in a love knot. His Arctic blue gaze rose from the yellowish page of the musty tome of biblical thickness, the profane classic that promised sex, vulgarity, more and dirtier sex, or so Laura said with a wink. The book was so scandalous it was prefaced by a judicial opinion that made it publishable in the United States of America. Norby Stade flinched. It was the flinch that comes from the gaze of another pair of eyes on the skin. Sometimes those eyes could be so far away as to remain unseen, but still, there it was. Distinct as a shoulder tap, irrefutable. He glanced over at the opposite row of park benches. There were old men, faces brown as the soil they had worked, as they talked in courtly tones of Pueblo. The tassels on the back of their straw Stetsons bobbed side to side. No, they were not looking at Norby. Only a gargoyle playing panpipes gazed from the red stone curvature of the bandstand, its nose destroyed like a sphinx by Napoleon's cannonball. Oh, Watsonville, its innate beauty and pristine nature, ever in a tug of war with mischief. Norby had gone into the bank and looked in vain for a trash can, and there was not a single receptacle inside or out of the bank. The manager told him, chagrined, "Somebody stole our garbage can we had." Norby, alone of all the states, had reason to flee the valley. They were happy and snug here. He was one of the restless ones. A throwback to that first of their clan, a great-grandfather who'd failed in his plan to collect gold nuggets from the Sierra Nevada and found gold in the fertile fields, in hops and sugar beets. Grandpa Earl got a road named after the Stades, so he'd know how to make his way home after a King Hell bender. He looked over, and a yellow-green gaze snapped on him like a blade. A head held up in the sky, inserted between Norby and the plaza clock in relief against a small patch of scoured blue sky, a moon of Roman numerals the color of dirty butter. "You smoke, boss?" He nodded. "I've got some good shit." Norby stood. "Show me." "Let's go somewhere else." They moseyed into the parking lot where the Marinovich building had stood ornately since 1899, until a wrecking ball recently disturbed its peace. Norby smelled what was inside the baggie. It was unbreathably pungent. "This is good shit," Norby said. "This your car?" The man's eyes glowed greenly. There was lust in his voice toward young Stade's car. He had the Jaguar, the old one with the chrome-spoked wheels that Mom drove from the era when Jaguars had style to burn, and burlwood dashboard under a quarter-inch veneer of glass lacquer. Norby said, "You like it?" "I could fuck it," he replied. "Take it around the block." Norby dangled the key. "You crazy, loco." "I know." After a brief rebelliousness on the part of the clutch, they headed out of the lot down past the soccer field, then the firehouse, then between the row of high concrete industrial buildings resembling a movie studio's sound stages, cold storage sheds, each block going into higher gear, squealing around a corner, somewhere in the industrial zone between the train tracks and the Yugoslavian cafe. They turned to the beach. The driver was named Ulises, like the book Laura had loaned him. She trusted Norby. He took it, though he didn't like novels particularly. Ulises opened the Jag to full throttle out by Thurwachter Road. They were riding on the wind. "Oh, fuck," Norby said. The library book was on Laura's library card, and he had left on the dewy slats of the park bench. They were halfway to the beach, and it started to rain. It took a man not to insist on turning back. Norby had it in him. Down came the rain, pelting past in obese silver pellets. Where else but the bench? He saw it in his hands, stately plump. It must be getting soaked under the rain and plumping up. "What's wrong?" Ulises asked, obliterating Norby's conceit that he looked carefree. Still, he managed to keep the matter of the lost book buried. I want to touch the sea, he said hoarsely. That's the thing I want to do first, put my hand in the water of the Pacific Ocean. He hadn't set eyes on the Pacific Ocean in the whole semester he had spent on the East Coast studying electrical engineering, ostensibly. These were his first hours in the valley, and he responded to the magnetic pull of the ocean that had seen him grow up. The forgotten library book should mean a speck of dust to him, yet it did, precisely because it was Laura's, and he felt bad for her. It was funny. It wasn't the big things, the earthquakes and viruses that get people, Norby reflected. It was the library books overdue and parking fines. Laura. He felt he was somehow mistreating Laura, even if he felt he was being mistreated. When they spent one weekend in Newark, he gave up using the condom. It kept sliding off. Laura said, no worries. She was on the pill. She had slept with a drummer named Jeff, and she had even been with a girl once to make her old boyfriend jealous. We laughed about it later, Laura said. She didn't think she would ever try it again. Norby wondered if she was telling the truth. At any rate, Norby was a staid and capable of buying off any unpleasantness of a lost library book many times over. But he was still ruminating about Laura's revelations. There was jealousy involved. It wouldn't be love without a touch of jealousy. You ever have sex with a girl on the rag? There wasn't much to say back to Ulises, with the car still roaring in their ears. Ulises added, my wife is so pregnant, I can't fit it in no more. Norby smiled, and somehow Ulises' remarks about his wife's pregnancy laid to rest misgivings about running off with this too friendly stranger. The door had closed. A line of trivial interactions could be pursued without penalty, and in truth, most folks are just fine with that. Whole swaths of the West are like that, like Watsonville itself. At the same time, it awoke a wistful regret in Norby for all the times he had shunned a friendly invitation and spontaneity due to suspiciousness. They reached the beach and parked on a sandy shoulder. Norby took off his high-top sneakers. Norby and Ulises stepped over the pools of eucalyptus shade stretches of cool, dry sand, domed by eucalyptus acorns that hurt in the soles of bare feet and ached. They trudged up over the dunes and toward the light, showing at the end of the leafy tunnel. They trudged over the dune paths ringed by curtains of silky Holland grass that came out of the dunes like straight tufts of troll dog hair. And then the big, sullen, slate-colored bay rose into view. Norby hurled his sneakers and ran through the loose sand and down the rampart of the dunes, off the loose sand and into the wet packed sand where the tide had washed it over. He ran, skirting sensual driftwood shapes and sargasso bladders, tormented by swarming specks. One Norby ran, kicking sand by seaweed that strewed the hissing shore along bits of crumbled sand dollar and pinched sun-faded beer cans. The ocean was at low tide and there were pilings, the sole remnants of a long ago pier and dancing pavilion. Grandma Chloe had talked about that and a trolley car to the beach. Ulises got to the foamy edge of the water first, stripped off his jeans and plashed feet into the sea. Norby followed. God, it was ice cold. His teeth chattered and his thin arms squeezed his hollow chest. Ulises was looking at the bikinis farther down the beach. He was splashing in the briny water. Ulises' nut brown and hairy legs, trunk, the calves toned by Sunday soccer, contrasted with Norby's soap pale skin and taffy hair. Tufts of dark hair sprouted above the tops of Ulises' Nile green trunks. The surf sizzled and roared. Following Ulises, Norby dived down head to invade the foamy curls that kept moving in, one after the other. Then he swam a few strokes in the calm waters before the cold forced him out. They walked up to where a man in a waist-high rubber boots had waded into the sea and was casting a line. There were some teen girls in neon pink and green bikinis. Norby eyed them, and Ulises flashed his smile and went over to say hi. Rain started coming down, and there was no cover. Through a quicksilver crease poured sun, and the big drops pelting down were illuminated. It's sun rain, they chanted. They squirmed and danced in this lit up flurry of raindrops coming down like molten gold. The borders between wet and dry, land and seas shriveled. Norby and the girls in the neon bikinis, and Ulises delighted in this paradox. Sun rain, they chanted and laughed. It came time to go. They retreated to the privacy of the Holland grass enclosure at the top of the dunes, the sand littered by black balsa-light chunks of black charcoal, the remains of fires and night parties. The sea begot freedom of body from the body and joined the sky and the water. Hidden by the thatches of grass, Norby and Ulises smoked out. Norby fixated on a tattoo on Ulises' forearm of a rose and the name in cursive, Marina. It's crazy, Ulises said. We're expecting a baby, and my oldest already has a child. I'm a grandfather. No way, Norby said. No way. I had my first when I was 15. Wow. Young. I know. We were too young. I got another old lady now. Hey, said Norby, I've still got to go back for that book. Somebody will take it to the library, Ulises said. No pasa nada. It's not from here. It's from New England. England, said Ulises. Ah, the Beatles, Queen, the Rolling. Then they staggered over the acorn bumps, digging into both their souls. It was a shared, unspoken pain. On the sandy decline back to the car, parked by a culvert, the sand was carpeted by long, slender eucalyptus leaves, tan and yellow. I'll drive, said Norby. He sat on the leather seat, and it soaked up the moisture from Norby's wet underwear. And with the body heat rose a brown, leathery smell that filled the car with the windows rolled up. Sand permeated the threadbare carpet under his feet. The Jaguar's tires whinnied when backing out of the culvert and into the driveway of a destitute farmhouse boarded up with cut power lines drooping from an upraised pipe. The Jag's chrome bumper sagged on a metal post. Norby gasped. Norby got out of the clotted, muddy dirt, the consistency of shit, and surveyed the damage. The damage was concentrated to the front fender next to the chrome bumper. The headlights still worked. If you look at it, Ulises said, can't see anything wrong. Norby scowled. That's okay. I can fix that, Ulises said. I got tools at my house. I can just pop that sucker out. Anxiety was choking Norby as the Sonoma weed made him wobble. He was eaten up by apprehension as the farmlands unfolded. Its parallel furrows fanned out in abeyance to the passing English motor car. The storm clouds were breaking up. The setting sun had a way of dispelling clouds and bringing it all into sharp focus with blinding intensity that interrupted Norby's driving. The silver sun followed the silver of the furrows covered by plastic and dotted by strawberry seedlings. The yard and drive beside the bungalow in Kalachi Town was junky. There was one old droopy Chevrolet, pasteled by rust and rain, tires deflated and rotting. The fenders, separated from the main car, leaned against a rusty chain link fence. Greasy chains festooned the cement cracked by cattail and milkweed. Barrels furry with old motor oil, dust clotted under the big plain windows, curtains drawn. For one of the town's poorest neighborhoods, the shanties and bungalows on the promontory had the best views. They rose up the hill of Chamberlain Street. There were the arches of Taco Bell, the spires of St. Patrick's on the long extension of Main Street that traffic inched up and down to the bridge. Yonder were the orcharded hills that cradled the farmlands, and the towns were soft, round, and deep green from the rains. Ulises pulled his forearm and up the broken wooden steps inside. Norby was engulfed by smells of Mexican house, the ubiquitous detergent, fabric softener, and the lingering smells of something good that had recently been on the stove. There was a yapping chihuahua, and the kids were running amok and poking it with a stick and laughing. This is my son, Ulises said, and he turned around the shoulders of the boy who had a slingshot in his hand. Quiet and unsmiling, a bony young woman stood, barely taller than the boy with the stick. She was globe-shaped in leggings that accentuated her bulbous state. A flea or feather could have sufficed to tip her over, but Norby wouldn't have been surprised if she broke water right then and there in the poorly lit living room on the rust-colored shag carpet. Norby took a seat at the dinette table. Something to eat, said Ulises, as he muttered something in Spanish to the pregnant woman who started to reheat chile rellenos. Congealed beans were nearby in an open pot, unrefrigerated. Was that safe? A warm old couple, sweatered and plaid scarfed, greeted him. A beautiful white and brown cat jumped on Norby's lap. The man with the bushy steel mustache of a German philosopher was happy to pump Norby's hand till it was about to detach from his wrist. The old woman, her wizened face wreathed by a shawl, didn't seem so happy. They could be Ulises' parents or grandparents. It was hard to tell. He wolfed down the chili relleno. It left grease splotches on the plate when the prongs of his fork went through the melted cheese. He smiled wanly when Ulises asked how he liked it. He put chili on it. They were suitably impressed by his tolerance for chili habanero. The Chihuahua yapped at the side of the table and begged for a bonus from Norby's plate. Don't. Ulises warned the dog and pushed it down with the heel of his hand. A gaudy Last Supper tapestry presided on a fake wood paneled wall beside a framed photo print of twisted Monterey pines above the sofa. Ulises took a picture of them all huddled together at the table with an oilcloth cover. He was treated as a traveler from an exotic land, which was true in a way. He had, since a band took him to Robert Louis Stevenson beginning in his middle school, his bonds to Watsonville had started to dissolve. A blue ceramic bowl held apples and a banana getting freckled by black spots. Tortillas warmed on the bare stove burners contributed to the fire categorical smell of burnt tortilla that hovered over whole sections of the town at mealtimes. They were all as happy as could be. Afterwards, the kids went outside and Ulises' young wife, Marina, shuffled out the door and they were alone. A one-eyed cat prowled, not without letting out a hiss at the chihuahua who scrammed to a corner. Marina labored down the steps with her protuberant belly, aided by a hand on the ramp railing and the old man with a bushy mustache. All the noise spilled outside into the afternoon, and Norby and Ulises were alone. "Where are they going?" Norby asked. Ulises pointed to the staple of St. Patrick's, the color of old copper penny, down the hill across from Taco Bell. There was a room by the big washing machine where there were bunk beds rigged by 2x4s, unpainted and smudged by kids' hands that had deposited booger collections nearby. And to one side, alongside an improvised closet, a single bed was covered by a velour blanket with a leopard on it. "Rest," Ulises said, with a gesture of hands cupped beside one ear. At last, after eating the chile relleno and a dollop of beans from the open pot left out on the stove that hadn't killed him, by the way, Norby obeyed the body's craving for stillness. He lay there in the dirty light, hearing the bell of St. Patrick's dully toll, and then tap, tap, tap on the window pane, drowsed off to that calming, percussive sound. The rain was back, propelled on gusts of wind. To the tap, tap, tap of rain, he drifted off as alternating whiffs of herb reached his nostrils. Out of nothingness, out of a dark tunnel burrowed to brassy light, the emergence was sudden as a snap of fingers. It was the delirious feel of the ankles on shore, and the retreating tide pulls back all the sand and glittery silt. There were fleshy lips on his cheek and an antagonistic grain of sand from the beach. Norby had been totally relaxed. Now, after being awakened, he was pissed. His Arctic blue eyes flashed, the patter of the rain on the windows, the fatigue from the flight from Boston dropped him off a cliff into an opulent drowse like he seldom had. It happened perhaps once every 3 years. First, for a split second, he thought he was with Laura. Now Norby's Arctic blue eyes stared, immersed into Ulises' green, verging on phosphorescence. At once, the expression of the beholder that Norby perceived vanished. "I'm sorry. I am sorry. Ulises uncoiled. "I didn't mean." "I don't often drowse off like that," Norby said. He scrunched up his face, both expression of anger and flexing those face muscles in wakening. Norby yawned and chuckled. Norby's fingers read the coarse braille of Ulises' face as Ulises read his. "Your skin is so smooth," Ulises said. Ulises looked away, and his yellow-green eyes were self-contained, inwardly gazing as he drew back into the shadows. His dark skin in the shadows made it hard to discern if his face was red. He pulled on the puka beads, and then the strand holding the beads together broke, and the floor below the bunk beds was littered by chalky white discs. Ah, shit. There they were, puka beads, like Halloween sour candies that nobody wanted and nobody ate. The beads bounced and scattered on the tile floor, and there was a circular scar on Ulises' neck, ribbed smooth, iridescent slashes as of dried school glue. Norby's fingers still burned with the rough bumps of the rope burn seared in a chain of scar flesh. The urge to clothe set in. Ulises hopped into black slacks with a permanent knife-edge crease and a white wife beater. He was a cholo, but that wasn't all. He kept on working his arms through shirt sleeves, and over the wife beater went a black shirt on which a flimsy brass badge glinted. Then went on a belt with his service revolver. You a cop? A rent-a-cop, Ulises said after a pause. Where? Norby asked. At the cannery. Oh. Norby left it at that. He didn't have the stomach to reveal that the Stade family owned the cannery. They pay very cheap. That's the reason I deal on the side. Norby clutched the car keys and left the house on Kolachi Hill. They never did get around to fixing the fender. Ulises didn't seem anxious for Norby to stay and get the dent pulled out. The old people would be getting back from mass soon. Down the hill, could see a small cluster of people who straggled out the front door of the church. Ulises invited him to come back later. Norby said he would. He'd come up with a lie for Mom and try to vacuum up the blizzard of beach sand inside the car. As Norby nosed the car down the hill toward Main Street, he was already yearning for something to fill the emptiness that yawned all around. The restlessness came back. Numbly, he drove back through the alleyways to skip the annoying one-way blocks of the avenue. He wondered how it would be to have a lover in one of the apartments where people have above garages. It was fun to dream about and anticipate going up those stairs on the side to some kind of lusty reverie. He turned from the avenue to follow the road along the creek. And when he was just about to turn at Stade Lane and drive home to that sedate, predictable cocoon, the signal light ticked on a rusty yellow pickup pulling up behind. Its headlights lit up the rain droplets on the car window. It was crazy how Norby had gone out of his way to avoid Watsonville, and here something unimaginable had happened. Being here had taken the scales off his eyes and opened a new door wide. He found innocence. He felt fresh as a strawberry waking from the rain. Coming back to Watsonville, of all things, had granted him blind, fresh innocence, the gift of chancing on a new side, the side that took him where Ulises took him. And that wasn't enough. He wanted more, even if it would hurt like hell. There was a movement and desire again. Blood bristled in the veins. Maybe he would paint his fingernails purple or get a skull tattoo he was thinking about, or wings across his shoulder blades. A sudden honk awoke Norby from his reverie. There was the yellow pickup behind. Norby was afraid the pickup could belong to his brother, Mitch, and Mitch could be full of whiskey courage after a stop at the Villager. Ulises Rocha was saying you tried to kiss him. I'm not going to have somebody say shit like that about my baby brother. Let's go. Let's go and beat him up. The honk receded through the encroaching darkness and twigs of apple trees. Norby's foot went down on the accelerator, and he headed straight to the two-lane that serpentined out of the valley, and then would join the stream of traffic on its pilgrimage into the city. Things were in motion. The blood sang. Possibilities teemed. Norby's neck tingled. There was reason enough to keep moving, no matter what. Things were now achingly beautiful and dangerous. That was a story, Ulises, from the forthcoming story collection, Watsonville Stories, from 80 Miles Per Hour Productions, coming this spring. This has been Graydon Miller.